I just want to say welcome everyone to day 2 of the 2021 Disability at Work virtual conference. My name is Doramy Ehling and I am the CEO of the Rick Hansen Foundation. As Mahadeo said on day 1, I am also new to the DWC Steering Committee. It is an honor and a pleasure to serve as your MC for the second day of the conference. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am joining you from the ancestral lands and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, and extend my appreciation for the opportunity to live and learn on their territories that includes the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Yesterday was an amazing start to the conference focused on fully including persons with disabilities in the COVID-19 recovery. Here's some highlights from yesterday's sessions. Minister Qualtrough started us off by announcing the funding for the community-based Disability Inclusion Action Plan, awarded to Independent Living Canada and Muscular Dystrophy Canada to consult and engage the disability communities across Canada and ensure the engagement includes those voices not normally heard. Minister Qualtrough followed her keynote with a lively questions and answer session. People with disabilities had their voices heard but remain frustrated. The voice of people with disabilities must be heard. We also heard that the CRPD encourages others to be included with the shadow report. Again, all voices need to be heard. COVID has highlighted some of the difficulties that people with disabilities were facing before. Statistically, COVID hit people with disabilities hard during the pandemic, but it is difficult to know what's going to happen during recovery. In Canada, the Disability Lens or Framework is currently being applied to funding that is mainstreamed. In discussions on standards development through co-design and engagement, participants talked about barriers to employment and the need for involvement in the process. In the DWC governance session, feedback emphasized the importance of ensuring that 50% of the representatives on the advisory committee are people with lived experience. We also heard how the initiative can influence positive change within all areas of the conference. It was exciting to hear discussions on how we can remove barriers by creating pathways for people with disabilities to engage in governance of the DWC and build capacity for advocacy. I would also like to share that the sharing of lived experiences was a highlight, especially for me. Storytelling of personal experiences, disclosure, transportation, and unfair living experiences were shared and valued. The first session of networking went well, and we encourage you to continue participating in today's session. Our theme for today is making inclusive spaces a reality. The conference will consist mostly of live sessions with some pre-recorded sessions as well. Our day will also include recorded vignettes about the lived experience of persons with disabilities or the experience of employers of persons with disabilities. We are grateful to the Canadian Association of Supported Employment for the vignettes. You can view these short pre-recorded sessions available on demand under the pre-recorded tab on the conference website, and we encourage you to have a look. For technical questions about navigating the conference website and participating in the conference sessions, please visit the FAQ page and take a look at the participant guide located on the FAQ page. We are also pleased to provide CART and ASL interpretation for all of the live conference sessions and French and English interpretation for all keynotes and many of the parallel sessions. For all conference and networking sessions, we are providing closed captioning using CART and ASL interpretation. Captioning is available by clicking on the CC button or live transcription button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can also view the live captions by clicking on the stream text URL posted in the chat box, if you prefer to view the captions on a separate screen outside of the Zoom platform. All pre-recorded presentations, including captions for accessibility, a video of the ASL interpreter will be on your screen, as your video layout in Zoom will already display the ASL interpreter in a side-by-side mode. You can adjust the size of the screen with the ASL interpreter by placing your cursor in the bar in between the two screens and dragging the bar side to side. For all keynotes and many of the parallel sessions, French-English interpretation is available. There will be a note in the program. Des interprètes français-anglais seront disponibles. French-English interpreters will be available. In Zoom, select the French language channel by clicking on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and selecting French. The meeting audio will then be translated into French by a live interpreter. Pour tous les discours d'ouverture et de nombreuses sessions parallèles, une interprétation français-anglais est disponible. Il y aura une note dans le programme. Des interprètes français-anglais seront disponibles. French-English interpreters will be available. Dans Zoom, sélectionnez le canal de langue français en cliquant sur l'icône interprétation au bas de votre écran, puis sélectionnez français. Vous pourrez alors entendre l'audio de la réunion traduit en français par un interprète en direct. Navigating the website is not accessible to you. You can send us an email to receive an alternative agenda in Words with links to join the conference sessions. We have asked all speakers to share with us only accessible materials if they want to post them on the website. Find any material posted on our website that is not accessible, please let us know by sending an email to info@dwcstrategy.ca, and I'll do that one more time. The email could go to info@dwcstrategy.ca. There is a chat box for technical support available at the bottom right-hand corner of the website for those having trouble accessing the virtual sessions. To join conference sessions, you must add the sessions you want to watch to your agenda. I discovered this yesterday. Make sure you're logged in, go to the conference sessions page and click on the title of each session you are interested in viewing. I know this was challenging for me. I wanted to see everything. Add the session to your agenda if it is not already there by clicking on the register and add to my agenda button. You can then join or watch by clicking the green join presentation button. All sessions that you have added to your agenda will appear on my personal agenda and you can access them from there. Note that this conference doesn't support Internet Explorer browser. Luckily for all of us, conference sessions will be recorded and available on the conference website for 3 months after the conference. Now, this next part's really important because we really want to get your feedback. To ask a question during a live Q&A, please type your question in the Q&A box or chat. The Q&A feature and the chat will be monitored and moderated in the Q&A sessions. You may also raise your hand in Zoom and the panelists will unmute you so you can ask your question. This year, our virtual conference introduces networking sessions that are designed to be an opportunity for delegates to share ideas and thoughts. The networking sessions will take place on the first 3 days of the conference. So again, it was there yesterday, it's going to be again today and again tomorrow. Following the first set of sessions, so from 2:05 to 2:25. To participate in a networking session, raise your hand by clicking the raise hand in the webinar controls or message in the chat box, and we will change your role from attended to panelist. You can then turn on your video and unmute yourself. You are also welcome to remain as an attendee and watch and listen to the networking sessions. We have also designated time for a conference hall before and after each day of the conference at 11:45 to 12:15 and 3:30 to 4 p.m. for you to explore the pre-recorded presentations, vignettes, and exhibitor booths. Conference exhibitors will be happy to see you in their booths. Besides learning more about the organizations and what they do, you can join the Zoom meeting to chat with an organization's representatives. So once again, just quickly, I want to walk through with you the overall goal of the conference is to identify ways to help implement the Pan-Canadian strategy for Disability at Work, which was developed in consultation with stakeholders and persons with disabilities. 2021 continues to pose ongoing challenges for the employment of persons with disabilities, and the DWC conference is focused on how to meet those challenges and continue to make progress on the implementation of the Pan-Canadian Strategy for Disability and Work. The first day of the conference focused on fully including persons with disabilities in the COVID-19 recovery. Today's session will focus on one of the two pillars of the strategy, namely fostering disability-confident and inclusive workplaces, making inclusive workplaces a reality. Day 3, on Monday next week, focuses on the other pillar, ensuring secure and comprehensive supports for persons with disabilities. And then the final day of the conference next Tuesday, we'll focus on moving forward together towards full inclusion in employment. So a wonderful couple of days ahead today and for the next few sessions. I'm sure like you, we're all very excited to be able to listen and learn from one another and experience and explore ways in which we can contribute. It gives me great pleasure to now turn this over to Alex, who's going to introduce our keynote speakers today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alec Farquhar from the Steering Committee of Disability and Work Canada. Thank you, Doramy, for this great framing of the day. And we've already done so much in our first day. There's lots more coming. I'm very, very pleased to be moderating, but I won't play too much of an active role other than introducing the speakers. A half-hour keynote panel. This keynote panel is a pretty unique concept that we're, I guess, taking a look at here to see how we can foster deep change in the workplace for full inclusion of people with disabilities. And we have 3 really vital, active presenters who are committed to these issues and are going to be calling out to everyone here, to our partners, to employers, to government, to disability organizations, to really move forward. And we're hoping that this call out is going to be heard in the remaining time in the conference, and especially on day 4 as we come together to move forward. So this session will focus on the barriers faced to full inclusion of persons with disabilities in the workplace and the strategies needed for deep change. Our first speaker will be Lily Chang. Lily's the Secretary Treasurer of the Canadian Labour Congress, so a very senior leader of that organization. She has a long history in the labor movement, which I don't think I'll go into too deeply, except to say that she's the first worker of East Asian descent elected to office in Canada's largest central labor body. So that's a real breakthrough and really symbolic of the kind of change we really want to see. Lily's going to start. Then we'll have Carlos Sosa. Carlos Sosa is a person with disability who has been very active in his union, United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 832, has benefited from their support in the workplace and in general, but also become a tremendously important leader in the disability community, including being on the board of Inclusion Canada. And again, his full bio is in the materials. Finally, we have Steve Mantis. And the idea here is that Steve is an injured worker who didn't have the benefit of a union to help and is in some ways outside the system looking in for the supports that he's needed to move forward after losing his left arm in an industrial accident back in 1978. Steve's been through the workers' compensation system and has been active ever since in working to improve the lives of injured and disabled workers. So I'm going to hand it over to our panel. The idea is 5 minutes from each of them approximately to start with, then a second go around in the same order, maybe 2-3 minutes, and then I'll step in toward the very end and we'll have the most powerful comments, about a minute each, to finish off the session, which ends at 1 o'clock. So thank you all, and Lily.
Thank you very much, Alec. Hello, everyone. My name is Lily Chang. Pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Canadian Labour Congress. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. I'm joining you from the treaty lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee. The territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share the land and its resources. So the CLC is the largest labor organization in Canada, and it brings together dozens of national and international unions, provincial and territorial federations of labor, and community-based labor councils to represent more than 3 million workers across the country. And part of my role includes guiding the work of the Human Rights Department, which includes the Disability Rights Working Group. So I'm very pleased to be here to take part in this important conference. The Disability Rights Working Group is made up of members with disabilities from across our affiliates and representing various sectors. The working group does some incredible work to advance policy priorities and address ableism in the union movement, and I'm very proud to work with them. For those who don't know me, I started my career as a social services caseworker in Toronto, and I was on the front lines witnessing the effects of unfair social policies and broken systems, and there's only so much that I could do in that position to help. I saw firsthand what happens when people are left behind. And this fueled my passion for social justice and made me fight that much harder to ensure that everyone truly has a fair chance at prosperity. It also led to my interest in the labor movement and its role in helping to address barriers in equity and inclusion. And I spent over 3 decades advocating for members at TP Local 79. Over that period of time, I saw a lot of changes in terms of workplace accommodation. But what has remained the same is the need to center workers with disabilities and shape accommodations based on their needs, not based on what's most convenient for the employer. And I took that idea into every negotiation and grievance hearing that I worked on and now apply it to my work at the CLC. So this past spring, I was elected to this position, and along with my fellow officers, our priorities are centered around equity, inclusion, and human rights. And having taken on this role during the pandemic, and at a time when people are struggling more than ever, these issues are finally getting the attention they deserve. We want to use this moment to push the government, push employers, and support our affiliated unions and members to step up when it comes to disability rights and the full inclusion of persons with disabilities in the world of work. The pandemic has shown what we can do in terms of accommodation. Not only is it possible to accommodate workers, it is beneficial to center them and their needs and can help foster healthier, happier, more diverse and engaged workplaces. And unions play an important role in advancing disability rights in the world of work. Unions work to eliminate physical barriers that limit workplace accessibility. We also negotiate health benefits that leaves and leaves that are often crucial to workers with disabilities. And we push hard to extend these benefits to all workers, including those who are not unionized, by lobbying for universal pharmacare, leaves, paid leaves, and other supports. Unions have negotiated and arbitrated when necessary accommodation needs of individual workers and lobbied for improvements to legislation, including workers' compensation, short and long-term disability plans, and accessibility improvements in our workplaces and our union spaces. But often, the best solutions come about when unions and employers work together to consider the needs of their members. A great example of a successful collaboration is the Niagara Health and ONA, or Ontario Nurses Association's joint return to work program, which brought together 3 unions, that's ONA, SEIU, and OPSU, to launch a pilot program linking return to work, accommodations, and primary and secondary prevention. This pilot, which started in 2009, included a renewed focus on fostering a safety and injury prevention environment, ramping up education and training, the introduction of injury prevention and wellness staff, mental health support, rigorous monitoring and evaluation, and new equipment and innovations to better prevent injury and accommodate workers. At the CLC, we're ramping up our advocacy and pushing the government to fast track and implement the Canada Disability Benefit and push for quick progress on the creation of a robust Pan-Canada employment strategy. We are continuing to advocate for the rights of workers with disabilities, including injured workers, workers living with episodic disabilities, those dealing with the effects of long COVID and others, and educate and push for cultural change to counter stigma and build solidarity and understanding on the true value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And with that, I'd like to pass the virtual mic over to Carlos Sosa, a member of the CLC Disability Rights Working Group, and a formidable disability advocate from USDW to share some of his experiences as a worker with a disability and activist in the labor movement. Go ahead, Carlos.
And of course, I have to unmute myself, but thank you. My name is Carlos Sosa. As Lily mentioned, I am a member of the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 832. Again, also a member of the Canadian Labour Congress's Disability Working Group. I speak to you today from Winnipeg, Manitoba, the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. My roots come from Chilean, Scottish, and Mennonite roots. I grew up in a household where my mother was active in her union, the Manitoba Nurses Union, and where I walked the picket line in the 1990s. And this was a cold winter, as I remember, as a 9-year-old. As a young person, I often encountered many obstacles while going to school, especially being discouraged by teachers that obtaining a post-secondary education would not be achievable thing for me, but I've proven the skeptics wrong by completing a bachelor's degree at the University of Winnipeg. As a person, I felt comfortable with myself as a person living with a disability when I first got involved in the Canadian Federation of Students Manitoba component. I subsequently became involved in the broader disability movement, and I'm now a member of the board of directors of Inclusion Canada as a director at large. I'm employed as a support worker that works with people with intellectual disabilities that live independently in the community, in a workplace that is represented by the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 832. I'm currently a member of my Workplace Health and Safety Committee and Bargaining Committee. In 2020, I was selected to be a part of the CAPE program, which is a program through CBC, as a researcher at CBC Manitoba, where I got the opportunity to bring disability perspectives to the airwaves. It is my understanding that there are very few media outlets that often offer these types of internships to people living with disabilities. With the theme of this year's International Day of People Living with Disabilities being leadership and participation of persons with disabilities towards an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID-19 era, this year's themes connects quite well with the theme that we are talking about today, creating an inclusive workplace. Many people with disabilities want to be included in the community and part of the broader society. For many people that I support, finding employment can be a significant challenge. This brings up a critical question of social inclusion. People with disabilities often utilize many public services, including those that are provided by libraries and even swimming pools and public transit. The impacts of the pandemic were profound, which saw the impact of the shutdown of many of the public services that our most vulnerable populations utilize on a daily basis. The public library, for some who I work with, was a critical resource because they could go and use the computers at the local library to check email and even look for jobs online. With the job search environment and now even interviews taking place online for many of the individuals that I support, just trying to get in the front door is a struggle. And we must consider these issues. We must consider social assistance rates because that impacts a person with a disability, because many people with disabilities are reliant on some form of government assistance. And this virtual reality, yes, it's moved resources online. Yes, it's been liberating, but there are still so many people that have been left behind because they simply do not have enough money to afford the computer or even access to the internet. One of the individuals that I support who was impacted by the pandemic lockdown in March 2020, he was laid off by his job and has multiple disabilities. And we know that people with multiple disabilities, according to the Canadian Survey on Disability, have significant barriers to finding employment. The person was very motivated to find employment. He really wanted to get back into the job market. His barrier was the fact that he did not have access to the internet. And with libraries being closed, there was no place for him to go for many of the services that he relied on. especially job search services that went online. So the only place for him was to use my housing co-op's boardroom, which we would sit together and go online and look for work. He just recently found employment as his employment insurance benefits started to run out. His situation highlights the need for critical supports, which would assist people with disabilities in finding employment. This is something that labor can play a significant role by working with community together to advance these issues. So many of you are thinking about is how have the United Food and Commercial Workers advanced the employment of people with disabilities? And our union has played a significant role in that. In both Manitoba and Quebec, we are very innovative in our approaches. In Manitoba, where I came from, my local, the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 832, in 2018, as part of a collective bargaining agreement with Loblaws, agreed with the employer to the following, and I will quote the actual language in the collective agreement. The union and the company will work to assist to establish a joint employment project to hire and support persons with disabilities in the workplace. The objective is to hire workers who identify as having a disability. The parties will work towards ensuring the worker's success in attaining and retaining gainful employment while integrating the supports and accommodations that the worker needs, including working with social services agencies that currently work with this population. May I say that this was initially pushed by B. Bruce, now CLC president, who at the time was the secretary treasurer of UFCW Local 832. At this point, I'd been a member of the Board of Inclusion Winnipeg, the local branch of Inclusion Canada, formerly Community Living Winnipeg. Inclusion Winnipeg at this point was the host site for Ready, Willing, and Able. Ready, Willing, and Able is an initiative of Inclusion Canada and the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorder Alliance, with the goal of facilitating the hiring of people with disabilities and autism. In my role, I connected my local with Ready, Willing, and Able. And since 2018, a number of other employers in various sectors, including meat processing and even hotels, have reached similar agreements with the local. And even nationally, a pilot project between RWA and Loblaws would not have been achievable without labor at the table pushing these issues at the bargaining table. In Quebec, TUAC 500 is working with various retail brands, including the provincial government there, on a training program that develops capacity among workers. So it's not just about hiring a person to be a cashier, but it's giving them the skills which allow them to progress into different careers, such as being a meat cutter. As I said, on the national level, my union is committed to working on pushing the employment of persons with disabilities. So we are working with locals across the country. And I would also reiterate again, the most recent partnership between RWA and Loblaws is just a reflection of this approach. And may I say, Loblaws comprises a significant percentage of UFCW members. It is a human rights approach to push for the employment of people living with disabilities at the bargaining table, as many people with disabilities are not at the same starting line. And obviously, this is just one approach that labor can play in advancing the employment of people with disabilities. It is critical that labor and the community work together and beyond our silos to achieve more employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And I will hand over the mic to Steve.
Thanks, Carlos. And thanks to everyone who is tuning in today. I have 5 key messages that I'd like to share, and then I'll go back and touch on them again. But the first is that employment for people with disabilities is doable, and it can be profitable for business. The second is that accommodations for persons with disabilities are linked to the issues of power and control, and also to communication. The third is that advocacy works. And by building coalitions, we can have more success. And that rights for all workers equals rights for workers with disabilities. And the fourth is that measurement and accountability are key to positive transformations. Count what you value, or you will value what you count. And the fifth is that our public systems are failing us. So let me go back a little bit in time now. As Alec mentioned, in 1978, I lost my left arm while working construction here in the Thunder Bay area. And when I looked around and went, who's going to hire a one-armed carpenter, I didn't really see anyone stepping forward. So started my own little construction company that I operated for the next 10 years. What I learned along the way there was that when I, as a person with a disability, have some power and control, the issue of accommodation is no big deal. That when we would sit down and with the workers I had working with me and discuss the job that was at hand, we would figure out how to really get the job done best, and then away we would go. So as the owner operator, I had control over that process where I wasn't dependent on someone else telling me this is the way it had to be done. When we talk about employment for people with disabilities is doable, after that 10 years, I went to work with the Ontario March of Dimes in Thunder Bay. And I became the manager of employment services. Back then it was called the Vocational Rehabilitation Services. My mandate when I started that in 1988 was three things. The first was to close our sheltered workshop that had been in operation for a number of years. The second was to bring our service delivery into the modern age. And the third was to expand training for people with disabilities around employment. As an organization, we had about 50 staff. We started 6 small businesses that were profit-making businesses. Throughout the organization, about 40% of all the workers were people with disabilities, and that 40% was right through the different management structures as well. So we had people with disabilities in charge and from top to bottom. And those little businesses made money that we put back into the service delivery, into the community, advocating for better services all around. In 1984, along this path, I was active in starting the Thunder Bay and District Injured Workers Support Group. That was a time when the provincial government was suggesting that they take away all the pensions for workers who had a permanent impairment at work in Ontario. As you know, workers' compensation systems are all provincial jurisdiction. We started our group, and by the end of the year, we were part of a larger coalition that was successful in getting the government to withdraw those conditions of the legislation. Throughout the next 37 years that we have been active, we have had a number of successes. We're not always winning. Clearly, advocacy doesn't win all the time, but it certainly is an important component of moving to a more inclusive society and workplace. And when I think about our public systems, I've been studying workers' compensation really for the last 40 years. When I lay in the hospital bed after losing my arm, the staff at the hospital said, "Are you covered by workers' compensation?" And I went, "Well, I don't know." So I got a copy of the Workers' Compensation Act and read it from start to finish. And I've been studying the system ever since. And what I've seen is that the system is providing less and less support for workers with disabilities. In the last 10 years, we have seen the expenses, the services rendered cut by 50% in Ontario, from $4.8 billion down to $2.5 billion. And this has created like a profit, a surplus at the workers' compensation, the WSIB in Ontario, that our present government is now planning to give billions of dollars to employers, rather than restoring the services that they cut, the medical treatments, the therapy that people need. Instead of returning that, they're giving that money back to big corporations. And as Carlos mentioned, the same is happening in social assistance. We're penalizing people who are struggling in their lives, and people with disabilities are a big part of that. And we're giving them less and less support. So that as I wrap up, I need to reiterate that our issues as people with disabilities and workers with disabilities are connected to the larger struggles in our society for rights for all workers, for the ability to participate in the workplace. And what really gives me hope is the one right that we have, that which is different as workers with disabilities, is the right to reasonable accommodation, which challenges the power, the ultimate power of employers to control the workplace, that we have to be considered, have to be taken into consideration, and have a role to play in determining what is an appropriate accommodation. Thank you so much to that, and we'll carry on with our discussion.
Thank you, Steve. We've got about 7 minutes left, so I think maybe each of you 2 minutes with your strongest points that you really want to leave the group with, hoping for engagement and uptake. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And, you know, those are two very powerful stories that we heard from Carlos and from Steve. And as an ally for people with disabilities and an advocate over my years of union representation, this is everything that you've said is exactly what I know, what I've come to know. And that is, we need strong social benefits. We need strong public services. We need the monies that surplus monies from the WSIB not to be returned to employers, but to be used to help those workers who need these monies, and what the program was originally created for. And you know, what I've known in working with people with members in the workplace is that oftentimes, you know, when you start off with a disability, a physical disability that is not addressed or accommodated properly, and supports are not provided, that often leads to then mental health issues, and it's even more difficult to return to work, even if the physical accommodations are provided. So at the CLC, our priorities are to develop an inclusive employment strategy, reform the disability benefits, and work together across the labor movement with allies, with workers who don't have a union to represent them, with employers, with civil society. And we want to do this because we need to break down the silos and work together, right? We need to build bridges. And what's most important in this work is to emphasize that workers with disabilities must lead this work, and they must guide the work based on their lived experience. This is critical to the success of every initiative and program that seeks to address disability and employment. We have to listen to workers with disabilities. And, you know, even though we're stretched right now due to the pandemic, we can't let up. We have to engage our membership, seize this opportunity when equity issues and the needs of workers are being covered by the media. And of course, we must also remember that workers and their needs need to be at the center of that discussion. So unions have a long-standing and deep history of supporting workers with disabilities, and we want to continue to do better and demonstrate true inclusion and solidarity. CLC released our Disability Rights at Work Handbook, which provides an overview of disability rights, specific focus on advancements and challenges in the workplace and the union movement. And this will help the employer. It's a guide on a duty to accommodate, tips to how to foster inclusive union environments, and many more practical resources for supporting disability rights in our workplaces, in our unions, and our communities. Thank you.
And just to respond, bring some perspective, I mean, the power of advocacy is so critical, and the importance of lived experience is so critical in bringing perspectives forward. And without that voice, then a lot of these issues would not get onto the record. And so that so critical voice is so critical, and we need to be thinking about our most vulnerable, particularly some of the people that I work with who identify as having an intellectual disability. And those are some of the most vulnerable who are often left out. And we need to make sure that their voices are at the table. I'm gonna pass it over to Steve.
Oh, thank you. We're having some technical problems with the video, but I really want to agree with both Lily and Carlos. The challenges ahead are magnified by the changes that are happening in our society around employment. We are seeing a move to more precarious employment. Gig workers, platform workers is the fastest growing part of our economy. And this is an area where workers have no rights. They have no benefits. They don't have EI. They don't pay into the Canada Pension Plan. They don't have coverage for injury or accident. And that's our possible future, is to have workplaces where workers don't have rights. We see within injured workers, we did a survey at one of our conferences and asked 3 questions. Are you back to work? Are you a union member? If you were a member of a union, 75% of the people were back to work. If you were not a member of a union, only 25% were back to work, which really speaks to workers' power and that issue of power and control. If you as an individual and really as a group that has solidarity in the workplace that can exert some of that power in the workplace, your chance of maintaining your employment or gaining that employment and sustaining it over time increases exponentially. So finding that balance where the workers and the workers with disabilities have more power in that relationship is key to our success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Carlos, Lily. You've started a really important conversation, and I know it's going to be carried on through the rest of the day and the 3rd and 4th days of the conference. These were powerful messages, and I have to say Steve's at the end was sort of heartbreaking in a way, just to see the tremendous difference between different types of workplaces. So we're going to close this keynote session with thanks to everyone and to all the participants.